The report today, one dead in Odessa as Russia's third consecutive night of attacks took place there. Ukraine says it blocked 18 out of 38 Russian air attacks overnight. Let's talk to Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Joe, what's the latest there?
Hey, Bob. Well, good afternoon from Kharkiv. It's a beautiful day, blue sky, 75 degrees, even during air raid alarms here, which happen so frequently. The parks are filled with people from young kids to grandparents, and everything is so well maintained. Perfect green lawns and flower beds, and everything is sort of calm, and you even see it feels like a type of happiness. And I see around me a society that is not corrupt, but insisting on life, a society that insists that war is no excuse to be messy, violent, or sad, even though there are plenty of reasons to be sad, and we've had some very scary days. The past 3 days, quite astounding, I would say. The Russians have hit civilian buildings and infrastructure in the port cities of Odesa and Mykolaiv. Before the full-scale invasion, both of these cities were Russian-speaking cities due to the colonial history of Moscow in those places. Many people now are trying to speak Ukrainian, of course. But these attacks the past 3 days, especially on those two port cities, coincides with that expiration on Monday of the year-long deal that provided safe passage for some Ukrainian cargo ships to deliver grain throughout the world. And not only have the Russians been attacking these cities now as soon as that deal expired, but they actually have attacked the very ports where grain was stored up, ready to be transported if the deal was allowed to continue. And today we found out, or late yesterday, we found out that in the attacks yesterday, Russia destroyed more than 60,000 tons of grain, which is, grain that could feed people all over the world, especially in Africa, totally destroyed. And then on top of that, in the city of Mykolaiv, which is the shipbuilding city, Mykolaiv is not far from Odessa. It's closer to Kherson. And it's amid these beautiful fields that one of our French volunteers likened to the French countryside there in southern Ukraine near the Black Sea. And Mykolaiv is traditionally a shipbuilding city, and the Russians hit an apartment building there. As of now, at least one person dead, 18 wounded. And then in Odessa, that beautiful seaside city, it's called the Pearl of the Black Sea, city with palm trees and sort of very elaborate cafes from the late 1800s. Outdoor coffee shops, spice markets, trolleys, wide boulevards, and that great Odessa sense of humor. The Russians have attacked it again for the third day in a row. And this time they've hit, and I think this is very surprising, but they've hit the center of Odessa, which is protected by UNESCO, United Nations Cultural Organization, some of the very beautiful historic buildings. And it's surprising because people have long thought that, and actually Russian tourists before 2014, before Russia took Crimean Peninsula and invaded parts of Ukraine, and even after that, Odessa was very popular with Russian tourists because it was a lovely city. And there's a sense that Putin really wanted that for his own. And maybe now he's realizing that he can't get these places, so he's trying to destroy them. So he destroyed a historic building, an administrative building in the center of Odessa. And during these attacks, in the early hours of this morning, the windows of the Chinese consulate were hit. And, China is, sort of a friend of Russia. So a lot of people are saying, how is China going to respond to this? The fact that, that they've been sort of touched in these attacks. And in the course of the early hours of this morning, it seems that there were Russia launched 19 cruise missiles, and 19 of those very sinister, they're all sinister, but 19 of those Iranian kamikaze drones. Among the cruise missiles were 7 of the Onyx missiles, which were launched from the occupied Crimean Peninsula. These fly at Mach 2, so over the speed of sound, about almost 2,000 miles per hour. And they fly at a high altitude, but then right before they hit their target, they descend very quickly, 10 to 15 meters above the target. So they can be hard to shoot down. And then the Russians also fired 4 KH-22 missiles, which travel at Mach 3, also extremely hard to shoot down. And this is why, the Ukrainians again are saying, I mean, they're grateful for the Patriot missile batteries that have arrived from Germany and from the U.S., but they need more because Ukraine is the largest country that's totally within Europe, and just a few batteries moving around the country cannot, protect for these unexpected attacks. In addition, there were 3 Caliber sea-based cruise missiles, 5 of the Iskander land-based missiles sent from Crimea, and 19 of those Iranian suicide drones. I think the air defense was not as we know the air defense interception rate was not as successful as it normally is, and it makes sense because this was such an intense pounding on these cities in the early hours of this morning.
Has Prigozhin's Wagner group withdrawn? Where are they? What's going on with that? There were several, I thought, conflicting reports about that in the last 24 hours.
Again, we don't know. I mean, there was allegedly kind of a murky video of Prigozhin surfacing somewhere in Belarus. The BBC said they could verify that it was some camp in Belarus. There probably is something happening there, but it's really impossible to know. To what degree is this a charade? Is it a distraction? Are they planning something? Meanwhile, in near Bakhmut, which is that's where Prigozhin, his Wagner private military company, spent they spent more than a year trying to take Bakhmut, and so the Russians occupied Bakhmut, which is totally destroyed. But the Ukrainians have been pushing back, mainly south of Bakhmut, and it looks like they're trying maybe to surround the Russians in Bakhmut. So we see a little bit of progress there. It's hard to know. But as we think about this Prigozhin spectacle, or whatever we want to call it, I've often said, knowing that we think that Putin likes to play chess, and so I often sort of casually refer to the war as some kind of as the highest stakes chess game. But I was just reading that Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion, one of the smartest people of our time, he was born in Russia, but he is very clear Russian dissident, and he lives in exile in the United States, and he's been a very strong voice in favor of Ukraine. In fact, he was very upset with what happened at the NATO summit. He said the West was not strong enough, and I went back and I saw that in 2015, the chess champion Garry Kasparov gave an interview with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, the American channel here in Europe. And he said that Putin is not a chess player. He's a poker player. And Kasparov says, in poker, unlike chess, the strength of your position is important, but not everything. You can compensate for a weak hand by bluffing your opponent. Putin is masterful at exploiting this weakness that has developed in the West over the past 25 years. The West, through its leaders and those who vote for them, are not ready for serious confrontation. As a result, Putin is just blatantly bluffing. And Kasparov said that Putin will not back down until Western leaders demonstrate political will. And so maybe that's what we see here. I mean, if indeed Putin did want to preserve Odessa, now he knows he can't get it. And now it's 3 nights in a row of these hellish attacks, perhaps trying to frighten people in the West. And as I mentioned the other day, the United Nations condemned Putin for not extending the grain treaty, but they've been quiet about these attacks on the actual grain and on the city of Odessa. And so echoing Kasparov, I think the question here, what Ukrainians realize is, as it gets scarier, is exactly the time to find your own courage and not to let that cow us into being afraid and trying to think that we can somehow negotiate with this type of enemy.
Let's hope Putin, the poker player, folds soon. Appreciate your commentary as always, Joseph, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Thank you, Bob. Until tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?